Sometimes when people see one of my larger paintings, they ask me how I go about making it. Questions like, do you know exactly what it's going to look like um, when you start? Or do you do a lot of sketches? Or are you starting from a story in your head that you've already thought up? Basically, you could boil them down to how do you work? And so for my latest large painting, the Quickening, I want to walk you through the process. Not as not as a how-to. It's certainly not that, but as a how I work kind of thing. This is what, and this is how it happened. Essentially, that's what I'm going to be doing here. So back in early October, I decided it was time to do a large painting. I do one of these a year, roughly. And I look forward to them because I get to spend more time on them than on the smaller paintings, obviously. But in that time spent, I can really get lost in the process, in particular in the story building process. The scene for this painting, The Quickening, that I wanted to paint, which at that point I didn't know that was the title, that comes later. But the scene that I wanted to paint was an encounter between a dragon and a boy. I enjoy the visual and the narrative contrast of big and small, of strong and weak, of fantastical and mundane, normal, everyday. And honestly, it's because I think that these contrasts and elements are really fertile soil for good stories. And I like to paint stories and then write stories based on my paintings. So I made some really quick sketches in my sketchbook and was happy with the general idea. And so immediately moved over to the canvas. I work on black. I buy white canvases, paint them black. And I do that because I like how it changes the colors of the paint that I put over it. And so I made a sketch with some white charcoal on the canvas. Now you might wonder, why is this sketch so loose? And there are two answers to that. One is I'm not great at drawing, and I'm not saying that in false modesty. I'm just not. I'm not great at drawing, and so it is. It's just a good starting point. That's what I'm laying in. But two, I like to create as I paint. And by that I mean I know the painting will change as I paint on it, sometimes in big ways. So a loose starting point is all I really want anyway. You know, if I could draw really well, it would be wasted because I think the freedom of changing the painting is what I really want. And that's, you know, I like that as I go. And so I draw loosely. Now this is a big canvas for me. This is a 24 by 36 canvas. And I know myself. And so I know I will get discouraged if I don't look like I'm making progress. So I quickly block in with paint what I can. Grass, in this case, grass, drifts of leaves, stones, tree trunks. And that doesn't mean I won't change them later, but it begins to fill the canvas and make me feel good about my progress. It also pretty quickly creates the mood that I'm looking for, the tone, the feel of the painting, which is helpful for me as I continue to discover what this painting is going to be about. I say that because I don't entirely know. I honestly don't. I know there's a boy and I know there's a dragon, but I don't know what's going on between them. I do know that in the month and a half, 2 months that it takes for me to paint this, I'll figure that out. I mean, this is, after all, my process, and it's a really fun way to work. When I've blocked in a good amount, I start to paint details. Man, I love details. And so in this case, I start to paint leaves. And as I paint I start thinking. I think, you know what? I think these big standing stones are stone acorns. The one closest to the dragon looks like an acorn standing on its cap end. So I go with that, and I tighten up that stone and make it just that, an acorn standing on its cap. But then I start thinking, man, I really want to paint those caps because they have that cool, like overlapping scale thing. And I think this setting is, in my mind, it's kind of becoming this royal court, or the forest dragon version of a royal court. So maybe these acorns are all set into the ground on their tips because that looks intentional, and also it will allow me to paint those awesome acorn caps. So I make the stones, all of them, acorns, tips buried in the earth. And for variety, I knock the cap off of one of them and put it beside the acorn on the ground. This place, I decide as I'm painting, is old and it's falling into ruin, and it's also a place of magic. So I paint motes of light drifting through the place. And then I begin to paint the dragon. And I decide as I'm doing that he'll be made of bark and vines and moss, a thing of the wood itself, but still a dragon, still with a core of fire, which can be seen if you look really carefully. You can see that shining fire between its scales. And then I think this would be probably more dynamic if the dragon was holding something, an object like a scepter, perhaps, or maybe an acorn. And so I repaint one of its arms holding a symbol of the dragon's power. But then I'm thinking about acorns and what they mean, or what they can mean, and how life comes from them, though they are encased in this husk of death, right? What if this acorn is somehow bringing life to this dragon? And that idea kind of, yeah, I like that. What if, like an oak emerging from an acorn, this dragon emerges from its shell? And this is brought about by the acorn it holds. And so I paint the dragon's true arm red and coursing with fire. The stone and bark scales fallen to the ground beneath it. It's at this point that I try to figure out how to draw the dragon's left wing. I have the right one down. It's this cool thing of vines and branches and some kind of leaf material. But I can't get the left one to where I like it. First I have it mirroring the other wing, but that doesn't look right, so I make it parallel to it. I paint it out and I draw it again. And at the same time, I'm also wrestling with the dragon's horns. I have this idea of something like curved ram's horns made of wood, but I can't get them to work either. Nor can I decide how I want this dragon's face to look. I have a rough idea in my mind, but I just don't know. So this first version, the eye on this first version is too large. And I mean, see what I mean by not being able to draw? This version's snout is, it's a train wreck, and it's it's adorably terrible. And this one is getting a little better. I decided to ditch the horns, but there's something about it that looks dopey. Both the eyes and the nostrils, they need something, and there's too much light contrast on the dragon's face. So I'm solving all of these problems, or trying to solve them all together, and I'm noticing this is wrong, how do I fix this, how do I fix that? And so I even out the light and narrow the nostrils and give more shape to the eye. But man, those nostrils, even after I've changed them, they're still too wide, still making this dragon look kind of cartoony or surprised. And I want it to look fierce, or at least, a little dangerous. But this thing looks looks like a gentle sea manatee or something. It's not what I want. And then I remember that the acorn is supposed to be waking this dragon up. So it doesn't even make sense that this thing has eyes, or eyes that can see anyway. I mean, it's if it's been sitting here for years, long enough for moss to grow on it and spider webs to form on it, which is what I've got it doing, it can't be awake. It doesn't make sense that it's awake. And at this stage, I feel kind of stupid that it didn't occur to me before. But hey, I mean, that's the process. So I have to truly make it a statue. So I paint out the eye, which really pains me, because even though that eye wasn't working, I thought it was a pretty good eye. And make the eyes these unseeing orbs. I also narrow the nostrils. And because this thing is waking up, I put a thin tendril of smoke coming from one of them. Lastly, I paint the boy. What is he doing here? Is he merely observing this moment of time? If so, what is it that triggered the acorn to awaken the dragon? This question bothers me. And then I think, well, maybe the boy can be awakening the dragon. But the acorn is awakening the dragon, I say to myself. So what activates the acorn? Oh, the boy does. The boy activates the acorn with an acorn of his own, one that is somehow linked to the one in the dragon's claws. And in that moment, I have it, right? I have the beginnings of my story, the essence of which is told in this single image. And I didn't know this at the beginning, and I'm just discovering it now. The boy's acorn spills forth magic, and the dragon's does as well. And the scales begin to fall from the dragon's body. The title would have been The Awakening, except that was the title of the collection of short stories that I just wrote and am putting out in book form. And it would have been confusing. And so after some thought, I settled on The Quickening, which means to give life or restore life, which I thought that fits. But it also means to cause to burn, which I thought was just perfect. So The Quickening it is. So that's how this thing unfolded. Like many of my paintings, in some ways I feel like it had as much to do with its creation as I did. It certainly took longer this way. There are a lot of different iterations of the painting under this final version. But for me, this isn't about efficiency. The process is about discovery and the formation of a story. And so this is how I work. And that's how this one unfolded. Hope this was enjoyable for you. Thanks a lot.